Well, hello everyone, Groves Church. How are we doing? There's not obviously an official service this Sunday, but I just thought actually it'd be really cool to unpack still some of the themes in Nehemiah 3 and 4. So in a sort of more informal sermon, very brief notes. I've preached on this before, so I haven't sort of gone in depth, but I just wanted to go through the passages, share some of my heart, and hope that it's helpful for us as we just go through the week, study it in pods. And if you don't get to watch it before then, maybe you can watch it as part of your worship on Sunday if that's helpful. But anyway, Nehemiah 3 and 4, we get to it, and what you get in Nehemiah 3 is a bit like the experience that I get sometimes when I open the book of Numbers. Very similar thing. Wow, there is a list of names. And then you think, Paul wrote that all scripture is God-breathed and profitable for teaching, rebuking, correcting, training in righteousness. I am wondering how those two fit together in this moment, because it is a list of names. But it's not just a list of names. I promise there's a little bit more in it. Now, I imagine that as you study it, not many of you will be going through the list of names. Although in our study, obviously, there's a helpful way to engage with that list of names, which I won't spoil if you haven't got there. But if you have, you'll know that it's more than just a list of names. But let me just give you a few things that you can pull out of chapter 3 that are helpful for us going forward. So Nehemiah, firstly, he's recorded all the people who've worked on the wall. And this isn't just an administrative task. It's also a sort of celebration of the faithful people who left homes and towns and came and said, yes, we're part of this project. We're in on what God is doing, and we want to build this together. And he starts by naming the high priest at the time. And this just shows us, I think, that actually it was led by good example, that the leaders in Jerusalem were essentially, rolling up their sleeves and saying, this is how I want to preach that God is in control of my life, and I'm obeying him and wanting to follow him. This is my outworking of my faith. Soren Kierkegaard once said that, if pastors were silent on Sunday and never told anyone that they loved Jesus, would the congregation see it in their lives the rest of the time? And I think there's that sense here of the high priest saying, yes, see it in my life. I'm leading by example. So we have, first of all, the leaders doing the job. So if you find yourself following leaders who you don't see it in their lives, maybe you've got to ask some questions. Secondly, what the list of names gives us, we start to see there's an incredible unity to the people of God. They've come together, all these different families, and they're saying, we are the people of God, and we are answering God's call to rebuild this wall. So you get this sense of family. And, we can outwork this in our church, that actually we are a collective. All the New Testament letters are always to churches. They're never really to individuals. There's a few, but even they have a sort of corporate outworking. So we've got to see ourselves as a unit. The Groves Church is a family, and all of us together are part of what God is calling us to. But in that same breath, we also have individuality, because all the different people are named, all the different families are important. Everyone has something to offer. And I think that's really important as well. We're a unit, we're a family. We go together on this call that God has given us, but also we're individuals, and each one of you is significant. Each one of you matters. And I know I've said it before, and in fact I said it to my daughter this morning because I want her to know it's true, that if the universe is a puzzle, then there is a piece that only you fit. And if you don't, if you don't put yourself into that piece, then no one else will. No one can fill that gap. Only you bring what you bring. You are significant, and you matter, and you're important to the Groves Church and the ministry of the Groves Church going forward. So there's individuality in this calling to rebuild the wall, as well as unity. We see incredible unselfishness. As I've said before, people have left homes, jobs, towns in order to come to Jerusalem and do this. So there's sacrifice involved in that, and I think that that's true for us as well. That following God's call is walking in the footsteps of Jesus. And ultimately, seeing the life of Jesus, he's always laying himself down for others, and ultimately he lays himself down for the whole world on the cross. Jesus says, "You want to follow me? Pick up your cross, and do so." And I think for us as a church, we have to say, actually, there's sacrifice involved, and where are those sacrifices? And am I sacrificing for what God has called me to in the Groves Church? And what does that look like? And we see that here with all of these names listed. These are all people who gave up in order to take up what God had called them to. Now, in the midst of this list, I think what's interesting as well is you also see disappointment, and that is bound to come at points. So Tekoa don't answer the call, and that's hard for them to take. There are certain people who decide, we're not interested in this, and that's hard, and we see that reflected in this list as well. And that's a very earthy, relevant thing that happens to us. We ask people, "Hey, do you want to come and join in with what we're doing?" And they say no. And that's hard to take. That hurts our hearts. And so we just acknowledge that there's disappointment in this project, and there's disappointment that we face ourselves as well. But then we have this continuing commitment, this desire to build a legacy. And I think in our culture, so much of what we do is like, well, I'm going to do it now, and it's for now. And we don't have sort of long-term planning in quite the same way. As a Manchester United fan, I'm very aware that all we tried to do for the first few seasons is just throw money at things to make things right in the moment, rather than saying, what's our 10-year plan? What's our 20-year plan in terms of building teams and investing in the right structures? And sorry if football isn't an easy mode for you to access, but there is this sense of we want to build something that goes beyond us. I would love for the Groves Church to carry on long after I'm gone, so I want to invest in people who can lead it and take it forward. I want to invest in things that will bear fruit for years to come, and we as a church want to have that sort of legacy. You'll notice in the list of names, if you read through, there are some people who build right in front of their house. And so you imagine for them, they're building a bit of wall that they're going to look at for the next, 10, 20, 30 years, however long they live for. And so they want to get it right, and they really want to make it something beautiful. And so I think for us as well, we can have that view of like, I might be part of this for years and years to come, and I want to invest in something that's going to bear fruit, not just now, but actually in 10 years' time as well. So there's this commitment to legacy that we see in this list. And they keep at it. There's an incredible enthusiasm. There are some people in here who you see they finish their bit of the wall and they're like, right, let's go on to the next bit. And for some of us, we will go for stuff and be like, wow, that's work, that's great. How can I help with something else? And I'm not saying go burn out, try and do everything, be a messiah. None of that. We're not in that business at all. But there is a sense of enthusiasm. Like this is a joyous job. This is something that we love to do. It's a privilege. God has called these people to rebuild the wall, and they're like, I can't believe God included me in His project. This is so exciting, and I love being a part of it. And I wonder for us, do we see that? Before I left on sabbatical, I said, the Groves Church isn't my idea, it's God's idea. And so I'm just sort of joining in with what He said He was doing on the Groves. And you being part of the Groves Church isn't my idea either. That's God's idea. So God called you to this. God has a plan and a purpose for us as a church. And that's a privilege that we've been called into that exciting journey, and sort of asking God, actually, what does it look like then for me to enjoy this privilege and be part of this team going forward? And there are rewards along the way. They build the wall up to halfway. They see the fruits of some of their labour, and ultimately they see God's faithfulness to them. He's constantly showing them that He's with them, and He loves them. So hopefully not just a list of names. There's some stuff there that's helpful in chapter 3, and then we come to chapter 4, and I like chapter 4 because again it's very real. It seems to smack of, yes, this happened because this happens again and again and again. As we try and follow God, we will experience opposition. That is a fact of life. It's throughout the Old Testament, it's throughout the New Testament, it's lived out in the person of Jesus, and I have ample stories of my own of opposition. Some of it passive opposition, just people who aren't really particularly keen and wander off, and some of it active opposition, people actively speaking out and saying, I don't like you, I don't like what you're about. And I try to continue to live my life in love and being loving and continually softening and learning to listen to people. But regardless, some people just won't like you because, as Jesus is not actually rejecting you, they're rejecting him in you. So that's going to happen. You know, Paul says anyone who wants to live a godly life in Christ will experience persecution. He says in Philippians 2 that suffering is granted to us as part of following Jesus. It's like, you know, here's your gift. It's going to happen at points if you want to follow Jesus. And it's no different for Nehemiah. The start of chapter 4, you see Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs, who, by the way, if you drew a map, are literally the surrounding nations around Jerusalem. So, you know, they are opposing the build, they're angry at it, and they're all around them. So they feel completely surrounded by enemies on all sides who are not pleased with what they're doing in answering God's call. Here, this is going to happen to us at points. We will experience opposition at times. Not always, because as we've seen already in Nehemiah, he's experienced incredible blessing and favour from the king, who said, here's safe passage and I'm going to pay for it. Right? So there's favour, there's people of peace, and there's people who answer the call and come and rebuild. And when we see this beautiful family sort of emerge and work together to rebuild. So there's lots of good things going on, but also there is opposition, and that will be the same for us as we follow Jesus. But don't panic, okay? There's a couple of things that Nehemiah does in the midst of opposition which I think are really important. First of all, he prays. Verse 4, he says, hear us, O God, for we're despised. And then he says, turn their insults back on them and just continue to help us out, basically. And this is great and helpful because what we can do in the midst of trouble is turn to God. You know, Nehemiah gives us this example again and again and again. Something bad's happening. What am I going to do? I'm going to pray. I'm going to turn to God and say, God, this is hard. This is difficult. These people are saying things that are hurting me. I'm trying not to take them personally, but I'm kind of feeling them and it's pretty hard. You know, all of this stuff you can take to God and say, okay, and God, you know, work in this situation. Work in this situation. Now, I remember early in the Groves Church, there was someone who I felt might be opposing us in just something we were trying to do. And they weren't part of our church at all. They were from a completely separate organisation. And I said to God, either change their heart towards us or move them on. If they're not going to change, and then, you know, and they seem to be trying to stop what you're doing, move them on. And not long after that, they left their job. Now, I'm not saying I got them sacked or anything like that. They left of their own accord. But since the new person who came into that role opened a door for us to do more of what we felt God was doing, and it felt like a real God thing. So I think, you know, prayer so important when facing opposition. Pray, and it's not just Nehemiah that prays. You know, it's not just me praying for you guys. I love praying for you. You know, as your pastor, it's my joy and my privilege to pray for you, and I do pray for you. But it's not just Nehemiah who's praying here. You know, although he could be an example enough, that actually in verse 9 we say, but we, the people say, but we prayed to our God and posted a guard night and day to meet this threat. So they respond spiritually by saying, as a people, we cried out to God, we prayed to him, we asked him to do this, but also they did some stuff practically as well in posting a guard as well. So we can pray in when facing opposition. But discouragement comes. The people do get tired. They do see this immense challenge before them. They think this is really big. This is pretty difficult. They don't like the aggression that's coming at them. It makes them feel a bit scared. All of this is here in chapter 4. Have a read and realise this has happened before. And if it's happening to you, if you're feeling discouraged because things seem to be coming at you again and again and again, it's happened before. And God is faithful in the midst of that. But how you're feeling is okay. If you're feeling a bit discouraged, don't be hard on yourself. Accept that actually it is hard when people don't accept who you are or aren't pleased with you because of what you believe. That's really tough. But in verses 13 to 20, what we see is that they stand together. They come back together as a people and they say, we're in this together. And as a church, this is God's great gift to us. Don't leave yourself sort of out on your own in your discouragement, but bear your feelings, your heart, your soul with people in this church who love you and who want your best. Pods are a great place to do that because they're small and they're intimate, and I hope they're helpful just to say, I am struggling right now. And it might not be opposition, it might just be life, but the point is God has given you a community of faith in order to bear your soul. So our unity is so important. The more we do this, the more we will learn to trust each other, walk vulnerably together, and have each other's backs. And that's really, really important. And then finally, what you see throughout all of chapter 4 is obviously just God is enough. He's good, he's kind, he's faithful, and he continues to give them what they need exactly when they need it. So, chapters 3 and 4, not just a list of names, and actually some very helpful, practical steps to think about how we deal with opposition. Namely, we go to God in prayer and we share the discouragement and the difficulty together and commit to standing with each other to say, actually, God has called us to this and we are going to stand firm because he's faithful and he'll come through. And he does, which is great. So I hope that's been helpful, and blessings on you. Have a fantastic week. See ya. Bye.